We continued learning about the book of Bereshit, the Parshat Vayeshev. Um, and the backdrop, we're going to talk today about, is it the third Aliyah, the fourth Aliyah? I think it's the fourth Aliyah, I don't remember, which is the Aliyah, the story of Yehuda and Tamar. Vayered Yehuda me'et Echav. Yehuda goes down, he descends from his brothers. What does it mean he descends? So he was in a position of high, he was in a position of power. He was the one who had first said, he had the plan for Yehuda, for Yaakov, for Yosef. I can't get their name straight. He was the one with the plan to sell Yosef. He was the one who everybody seemingly followed. And there are many things to say about this story. There's a beautiful midrashic comment that talks about what happens with after the sale of Yosef. Yaakov is crying, and Yehuda is depressed. And you look at the story where, of course, in the end, Yehuda sleeps with his twice former daughter-in-law, Tamar, and they give birth to two children, to Peretz and Zarach, and those are from them. The Davidic dynasty comes, and the Messiah comes, and the Midrash says, right, Yaakov is crying, Yehuda's depressed, and Yosef's in slavery, and what is God doing? God is planning for the Mashiach. It's a beautiful midrashic statement that's made about the story without getting into the details, but the story, obviously, part of what the midrash is saying here is this story, which seems so strange and so weird, is a story that has an incredible amount of relevance to the future. Incredible amounts of relevance to the future. Tamar is the reason why Yehuda's line is able to continue. Tamar is the reason why we have David HaMelech, not the only strange sexual story in David's lineage, but certainly one of them. And Tamar is really a very, very significant person as a result due to her boldness. But part of the backdrop to the story is when Yehuda comes with his brothers with the coat that has been dipped in blood and stands in front of Yaakov and says, Hakerna, recognize this, right? Is this Haktonet bincha hiim lo? Is this your son's coat or is it not? And he uses that deceit. We talked about it as being karma in a sense for Yaakov who deceived his father while wearing the furs of his brother, that Yaakov is getting it because of what he had done in the past. And what happens in this story? Again, so what's the basic of the story? Let's go back. Yehuda has a son. His name is Er. He's bad. He's evil. God kills him. He has a second son named Onan. Onan does what we would call a yibum today. He marries his brother's wife. They didn't have any children, but Onan, like the English term onanism, Onan refuses to finish the sexual act with his wife because he doesn't want the child to be named after Er. And God is upset, and God kills Er. And then he has a third son, Yehuda, and his name is Shelah, which of course sounds like the word Shelah, which in Hebrew means hers. Shelah was Shelash. He was Zakuk Tamar. He should have belonged to Tamar. They should have gotten married. But Yehuda, what does Yehuda say? Tamar's an evil woman. Tamar's a husband killer. We need to get rid of her. And he tells her, go home. When my son Shelah grows up, then I'll call for you. So a day goes by, a week goes by, a month goes by, a year goes by, perhaps a decade goes by, perhaps a decade and a half go by. Not sure exactly how long it is. And Tamar is sitting there. She can't marry anybody else. She is obligated to marry Shelah, but she never hears anything from Yehuda. Yehuda's depressed. He's down. He's somewhere near where Tamar lives, and word comes to Tamar, and Tamar dresses up. Again, one of the themes that we've seen in this book, the dressing up, the deception. Dressing up very often is from somebody who is in a position of a lower position, an underdog position, a position where somebody is ignoring them and they can't come straight forward and request or ask what they want. So they have to dress up. They have to disguise themselves. And Tamar disguises herself. Yehuda does not recognize her. Yehuda, of course, sleeps with her. She becomes pregnant. And this is, you were speaking earlier today, Deborah, how Tamar is one of your heroes. So what's one of the great things that happens here? in many of these stories, what happens? You have a problem with somebody, you have a problem in life. What do? What does everybody tell you to do? Speak to the person, talk to the person, tell them the issue. Privately, publicly, what does Tamar does? Something very, very different. Tamar puts the ball in, of course, Yehuda's court. Do you recognize this walking staff? Yehuda, when he slept with Tamar, didn't have money to pay the prostitute, so he gave her some of his personal items, his walking staff, his seal or a stamp. Later on, he pays his debts. He sent somebody to pay the prostitute, and somebody said there was no prostitute there. They can't find her, and it's a few months later. And right, so what does she do? As we know in the story, she sends him these items. And what does she say to him? She says, recognize these items if they are yours. She asks him again to recognize them. Yehuda, who used deception to his father. Yehuda, who was the leader of the brothers, who said to his father, do you recognize these items? Haker na. Do you recognize them? His reversal comes in the very same way. The very same way through this idea of lehakir, to recognize things. And what does Yehuda recognize here more than anything else, we could say, is Yehuda is not just recognizing is not just recognizing his objects. He's recognizing Tamar, and he's recognizing that he was wrong. He says to Tamar, he says about her, Tzadka mimeni, she is more righteous than I. Vayaker Yudah, Vayomer Tzadka mimeni is chapter 38, Parak Lamed Chet Pasuk Chaf Vav. He says, I now recognize that she is more righteous than I. And what does that mean? It's not just she was right when she disguised herself and slept with me, but what it means is she was right all along. She was correct about this whole story and this whole situation. I thought she was the husband killer. I thought that she was the sinner. I thought that she was the reason why my two first sons died. But no. She's Tzadka mimeni. She has been more righteous than me. And the key part of the key word here in the story is that word haker. Right in the verse in 25, that's when she says, Vatomer haker na lemi achotemet vaptilim. She says, can you recognize these things? Examine them. Whose seal and cord and staff are these? And of course, Yehuda would know that those things belong to him after he had pronounced that Tamar, now is his chance to kill Tamar. He doesn't have to give her over to Shelah. And that's part of the core of what's going on in this story. It's obviously a moment where Yehuda redeems himself. It is a story that is demonstrative about Yehuda, his ability, where he fits in the family. It is a linchpin that changes Yehuda's life, where he recognizes that he might have seen things the wrong way. And it's part of this word, which is a key word in the second half of the book of Bereshit. Starting with Yaakov, do you recognize whether or not this is the code of your beloved son Yosef? Yehuda does not recognize Tamar because she covers herself. Yehuda is then told to recognize Tamar. He recognizes her and recognizes himself and his actions. And of course, what goes on later on in the story? The brothers go down. And part of the whole story there is, of course, the word, right? Lehakir. The brothers do not recognize Yosef, but Yosef recognizes the brothers. Yosef makes himself unrecognizable. He doesn't talk to them in a way that they would in any way, shape, or form think that it's him. And it's only through him recognizing that they have changed is he willing to recognize them and reveal his identity and who he truly is. And so a linchpin of the second half of the book of Bereshit is this word lehakir, is this word recognition. Yehuda recognizes that he's done something wrong, and that begins to change. That changes who he is. It allows him to become the person who he was, a leader again amongst his brothers. It allows him in time to say to his father, I take responsibility for Binyamin. It allows him to defend Binyamin, and which then in turn allows Yosef to offer himself and that recognition, and that changes everything. That, in a sense, is the complete tikkun. It's the reversal of the brothers tricking Yaakov, and it's the reversal of Yaakov tricking Yitzchak. It's this recognition of who I am, and I'm not going to be duplicitous. I'm not going to use trickery. I'm not going to do things like that, deceit, even if I'm in a place of of trouble. Yehuda could have done something else at this time, in the beginning of Parshat Vayigash. But he doesn't do that. He doesn't attempt to use trickery. He recognizes the situation. He recognizes who he is. He recognizes his role in it. And that recognition changes everything, allows Yosef to believe that he can reveal himself, and the brothers can recognize him, and they can recognize, as it were, the divine plan. And so that word, if you look through these parshiot, you'll see over and over again, haker, haker, recognize this, recognize that, see who it is. And part of what's, part of what's fascinating here, and we talked about it, a couple of weeks ago with Rivka, and we talked about it when we talked about, in a sense, Batsheva and Sarah, is that this is a very patriarchal society, certainly. The men rule the roost, they are in charge, but in all of these stories, we have these women who cause such significant things to happen. Sarah, right? What does God say? Kol asher tomar alecha Sarah shma b'kola. Listen to Sarah. Sarah is the one who makes sure that Yitzchak and Rivka, who gets the prophecy. The prophecy about the two sons doesn't go to Yitzchak, it goes to Rivka. I know Rivka went to search out God, but Yitzchak was also davening and calling out to God. But the prophecy goes to Rivka. She is the mover in that family, in that generation. And Tamar here as well. Tamar here is this point. Would Yehuda have changed if Yehuda hadn't had that moment where he would have been challenged to say, I can get rid of Tamar, or I can admit my mistake and I can move forward in life? If he wouldn't have been challenged that way, who knows what would have happened? And so Tamar's challenge of Yehuda is critical. It is so critical at this moment, and she puts the ball in his court. She doesn't do it publicly. She doesn't force him, and that allows him to face his demon and move forward in a way similar, like we talked about, the whole question, how is Yaakov alone? Why is he on one side of the river and everybody else is on the other side of river? We tried to use some explanation that sometimes the way it works is if you have something that you've done terribly in life, a mistake that you have made, you should always call out to friends for help, for assistance, for this and that. But you have to slay the dragon. You have to be the person who defeats your demon. You have to be the person who says, I made that mistake. I'm not going to make that mistake again. That is Yaakov prior to meeting up with Esav when he's left alone, and that's Yehuda here. And the person in this story who causes it to happen is Tamar. A Tmura, changes the fate of of Yehuda, and in doing so, changes the fate of Bnei Israel. And so it's another example of women in the book of Bereshit who are, in a sense, under the radar, behind. God speaks to Avram, God speaks to Yitzchak, God speaks to Yaakov, God speaks to, everything is going on through Yosef and through Yehuda, but who is pushing them forward? It's very much sort of the idea, if you want to put it in a sense, very much the idea like when Adam is alone, and we talk about an Ezer Kenegdo, we talk about a helper who is opposite you, that the husband and wife together can move the path forward. And so Tamar here, she is, I think, an incredible heroine of the Jewish people. What she does here is tremendous, and she does it in a way that's very, very different. Not through confrontation, not through fighting, but challenging Yehuda. You made the mistake. I'm giving you the opportunity to fix it. Now, if Yehuda had denied it, who knows what she would have said then? Nobody wants to get burned to death, as far as I know. But what would she have done then? But he passes the test, and in doing so, he changes his path, which changes the path of the family, and in time changes the path of our entire people.